Some stories begin with love. Some begin with loss. This one begins with a corsage. It begins with a 17-year-old girl standing in front of her bedroom mirror, turning slowly, watching the pale gold fabric of her dress catch the evening light. It begins with her mother fastening a delicate chain around her neck and stepping back with tears in her eyes, because her daughter, her Jasmine, looked like the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. It begins with a boy showing up at the door with a smile that had been perfected for an audience that wasn't there yet, a smile that meant something different from what it showed. And it ends. Well, let me tell you how it ends. My name is Ace Morrow. I am Jasmine's father. I was once a United States Marine, and before that I was just a man who believed that if you kept your head down, worked hard, and trusted in systems built to protect the innocent, the world would return the favor. I don't believe that anymore. What I believe now is this. There are two kinds of justice. The kind that lives in courtrooms, on paper, behind badges and gavels, and men in expensive suits, and the kind that lives in the hands of people who have nothing left to lose. I'm going to tell you everything, every single thing, because Jasmine deserves to have her story told, the real one, not the version that got buried under legal motions and favors called in over golf courses, and because the people who hurt her deserve to be known. I wasn't there the night Arlo Pemberton showed up at Rachel's door. Rachel and I had been divorced for 4 years by then. We split when Jasmine was 13. It wasn't a violent split or a hateful one, just the slow, grinding erosion of two people who wanted different things from life. Rachel wanted stability, roots, a house in a quiet suburb with a good school district. I'm not sure I ever knew what I wanted. The Marine Corps had spent 6 years teaching me how to be useful in crisis and nearly useless in calm. Peacetime didn't sit right on my bones. We shared Jasmine. Weeks on, weeks off. It worked most of the time. Jasmine was the kind of kid who made everything work. She was adaptive, warm, endlessly patient with two parents who were still figuring out how to be adults. She had Rachel's grace and, heaven help her, my stubbornness. She had dark hair she wore in braids half the time, a laugh that came from her belly, and a habit of correcting people's grammar that she'd picked up from her 8th grade English teacher and never put down. She was the best person I knew. When Arlo Pemberton asked her to prom, she called me first. I remember exactly where I was, sitting on the back step of my apartment, drinking coffee that had gone cold, watching a sparrow pick at a bottle cap in the parking lot. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name. I answered before the second ring like I always did. Dad, okay, don't make it weird. I haven't said anything. You're already making a face. I can hear it. I laughed. Who asked you? Arlo Pemberton. Even I knew that name. You couldn't be within 20 miles of Hargrove Falls and not know the Pembertons. Hargrove Falls was the kind of town that had a founding family, and the Pembertons were it. 3 generations of money, land, and influence, built on a construction empire that had put its name on half the buildings in the county. Arlo's father, Gideon Pemberton, was the kind of man who showed up at charity galas and town council meetings and had his photo taken, shaking hands with the mayor with the comfortable ease of someone who had purchased that access long ago. Arlo was the youngest of 3 sons. He was on the football team, had good grades, or so the story went, though I later learned those grades had been quietly, generously assisted by a school administration that valued the Pemberton family's annual donations to the athletics program. He was tall, jaw-forward handsome, the kind of boy who owns a room and knows it. He just came up to me at lunch, Jasmine said, in front of everyone. He had flowers, Dad, daisies. He remembered I like daisies. The detail landed in me funny. Not wrong exactly, just funny. How did Arlo Pemberton know Jasmine Morrow liked daisies? They didn't run in the same circles. She was in AP classes, the debate team, the kind of student teachers remembered. He was in a different stratosphere socially, the kind of boy who acknowledged girls like Jasmine when he needed a homework answer and otherwise looked straight through them. But I didn't say any of that because she was 17 and she was happy. And that happiness was so pure and uncomplicated that I didn't have the heart to put a single shadow across it. Did you say yes? I said yes. Then I'm happy for you, Jazz. You're still making a face. Good night, baby. I smiled. Night, Dad. Love you. I sat on that step for a long time after, watching the sparrow. The bottle cap had won. I found out about the bet 6 weeks later, after everything had already gone wrong. A girl named Destiny Okafor told us. She was 17, Jasmine's closest friend, and she came to the police station the morning after the prom with her mother and a printout of a group chat she'd screenshot 3 weeks before the night. She'd kept it because something felt wrong, and she didn't know what to do with that feeling. And by the time she figured out what to do with it, it was too late. The group chat had 11 members, all boys from the football team. Arlo's name was at the top. I'm going to tell you what was in that chat plainly, without dressing it up, because it has to be said plainly. 6 weeks before the prom, Arlo Pemberton had made a bet with 10 of his teammates. The terms were straightforward and revolting. He would ask the most unlikely girl he could find, someone outside their social circle, someone who would be visibly and publicly overwhelmed by the attention, and he would take her to prom. The objective, which was laid out in the chat, with the casual cruelty of boys who have never faced a consequence in their lives, was to see how far it would go. There was a pool, $800, contributed in $20 and $50 bills, sitting in Arlo's gym bag. Jasmine was chosen because, in the words of one of the messages I will not reproduce here, she was the type who wouldn't see it coming. They were right about that. She didn't see it coming. She'd spent 6 weeks believing. Rachel had taken her to 3 different dress shops before she found the right one. Gold fabric, fitted at the waist, with a small train that Jasmine kept accidentally stepping on during the fitting and laughing about. Rachel had cried in the car afterward, she told me later. She cried from the specific piercing joy of watching your child get something she deserves. Jasmine had texted me a photo of the dress. I had it saved, and I still have it saved. Rachel called me at 1:47 in the morning. I was asleep. My phone was charging on the nightstand, and when it rang, I reached for it half blind, saw Rachel's name, and sat straight up. We had an unspoken rule, Rachel and I. We didn't call each other in the middle of the night unless it was about Jasmine, and we didn't call each other in the middle of the night about Jasmine unless something was wrong. She hasn't come home. Those 4 words and the sound of Rachel's voice behind them, carefully controlled, the way people sound when they're doing everything in their power not to fall apart, were the coldest thing I have ever heard. Prom ended at midnight. Jasmine had texted Rachel at 11:15, just leaving for the after party. Be home by 1, love you, and then nothing. No response to texts. Calls went straight to voicemail. I was in my car in under 3 minutes. The police were called. 2 officers came to Rachel's house, young, kind guys, asking questions in low voices, while Rachel sat at the kitchen table with her hands folded in front of her, and her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. They took down Arlo's name, the address of the after-party, Jasmine's phone details. By 5 a.m., they had contacted Arlo Pemberton. By 7 a.m., I understood what we were dealing with. Arlo had lawyered up. It wasn't with a family friend or some local attorney pulled out of bed. It was with Harry Lee, the most aggressively successful criminal defense attorney in the state, who had his offices in the capital and charged $1,000 an hour and had, in the last decade, made several high-profile cases quietly disappear. He was at the police station before the detective assigned to Jasmine's case had finished his first cup of coffee. The lead detective's name was Vargas. He was 3 years from retirement, soft around the middle, with a blankness of a man who had learned to keep his expressions away from his work. He told us carefully, with the specific tone of someone choosing every word, that they were pursuing all available avenues and that he couldn't speak to ongoing investigative matters. What he didn't say was this, that Gideon Pemberton had made 3 phone calls between 6 and 7 a.m. One to the chief of police, one to the deputy mayor, and one to a man whose name I learned much later, who had no official title, but who was, by the understanding of everyone in Hargrove Falls who moved in certain circles, the person you called when you needed something to go away. I didn't know any of this yet. What I knew was that my daughter was missing, that the last person to see her was Arlo Pemberton, and that Arlo Pemberton was sitting in a police station conference room with Harry Lee and showing no apparent concern. I went home. I called the only people in the world I trusted completely. His name was Sergeant Dwayne Coop Cooper, retired like me, though he'd done 2 more tours than I had, and carried the evidence of them in his left knee, and the way he sometimes went quiet mid-sentence. He was 6'3", 230 pounds, and the gentlest man I'd ever known, right up until he wasn't. I called Coop at 7:30 in the morning. I told him everything. When I finished, there was a silence on the line, and then he said, "Who else do you need?" "Everyone." By noon, there were 7 of us. Coop came, so did Harry Webb, who went by Sparks for reasons that predated my knowing him and had never been fully explained. And Tomas Rivera, who had left the Corps to become an EMT and carried a trauma kit everywhere he went, and Bo Hensley, who was the best tracker I'd ever served with, and who had once, in the Helmand province, found a man in 48 square kilometers of nothing based on footprints and instinct. Also Delia Fraser, who had been Intelligence Corps and could find information in places that information had no business being. And Owen Park, who didn't talk much, but who, when he did, said exactly the right thing. We met at Coop's house. I laid out what I knew: Jasmine, the prom, Arlo, the last text, the police response, the lawyer. I told them about Gideon Pemberton. I told them about the group chat Destiny had shown me. When I finished, Delia had already opened her laptop. "Give me 6 hours," she said. We gave her 4 before she had something. Gideon Pemberton was not merely a wealthy contractor with community investments and a philanthropic reputation. Gideon Pemberton was a man who had spent 20 years building a very specific kind of infrastructure. Favors extended, donations made, investigations quietly redirected. He had a file, not a physical one, but the kind that Delia could assemble from digital fragments, public records, leaked documents floating in corners of the internet that most people didn't know to look in, that painted a picture of systematic, deliberate, long-practiced corruption. There had been 3 prior incidents involving Arlo, 2 in high school and 1 the previous summer, involving a girl from a neighboring town who had filed a report and then, within a week, withdrew it. Her family had received, shortly after the withdrawal, a settlement whose terms included a non-disclosure agreement so airtight that the attorney who drafted it charged Gideon $60,000. 3 prior incidents. 3 sets of parents who had been quietly, expensively, and completely silenced. Delia put it on the table between us. "This is not a one-time thing," she said. The room was very quiet. Bo was looking at a map of Hargrove Falls he'd spread across Coop's kitchen table, property records, event logs, the GPS coordinates attached to Jasmine's last text. "The after party was here," he said, pointing. "Private property, Pemberton land, a guest house on the north edge of the family estate." He looked up at me. "I'd start there," he said. "I want to be precise about this part, because it's important. We didn't go onto that property with weapons. We went with flashlights, with Tomas's trauma kit, Bo's instincts, and Delia's pre-pulled satellite images, and the cold, focused discipline of 7 people who had trained for years to operate in the dark without losing themselves. The Pemberton estate was 12 acres. The main house sat at its center, 4 stories, Georgian columns. The guest house was a quarter-mile north, separated from the main structure by a stand of old oaks and a stone wall that had been built in the 50s and hadn't been maintained since. We went over the wall at 2 a.m. Bo found the trail in 11 minutes through broken undergrowth, disturbed soil, and a heel drag pattern that made Tomas's jaw tighten when he saw it. She was in the pool house. Not the guest house, a secondary structure, older, half hidden behind an overgrown privacy hedge that didn't appear on the public property record Delia had pulled. Someone had known to put her somewhere that wasn't obvious. The door was locked. Coop dealt with the lock. She was conscious. That's the first thing. She was conscious, and when the flashlight beam found her, she turned her face toward it. She was hurt badly enough that Tomas immediately dropped to his knees beside her and started working, and didn't stop for 12 minutes. She had been there for over 20 hours. She had a phone. They'd taken it. She had tried at some point to reach the door but hadn't made it. When I knelt next to her and she recognized my face, she grabbed my arm with both hands and didn't let go. I didn't let her go either. Tomas stabilized her. We moved her carefully, professionally, with the practiced coordination of people who had moved the injured before, under worse conditions. We got her over the wall, into the vehicle, and drove straight to the hospital. I called Rachel from the car. I won't tell you what Rachel's voice sounded like. Some things belong only to the people in the room. Jasmine spent 4 days in the hospital. She had 2 fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, lacerations, and injuries that the doctors documented with the careful specific language of people who have been trained to leave no legal ambiguity in their records. Every injury was documented, photographed, and filed. We had an attorney, it wasn't a local one, not someone who could be reached by a phone call from Gideon Pemberton. Rachel had a cousin in New York, a woman named Petra Solis, who was a civil litigation attorney with a reputation for taking cases that other lawyers wouldn't touch. Petra flew in on the second day. By the time she landed, Delia had sent her everything. The police investigation had, by this point, quietly stalled. Detective Vargas had filed 2 reports that said almost nothing. There had been no search of the Pemberton property. There had been no interview with Arlo beyond the initial lawyer-shielded session. The case file was thin, bureaucratic, going nowhere with the methodical non-urgency of something that was being managed. Petra read the file in 2 hours. Then she looked at us over the top of her reading glasses and said, "They made one mistake." We waited. They assumed the family would stay quiet. What happened next happened on 4 fronts, simultaneously, and I want to lay them out clearly because each one matters. The first front was public. Delia had a contact, a journalist named Yolanda Marsh who worked for a regional investigative outlet with a national digital footprint and a history of covering institutional corruption in small American towns. Yolanda had been building a file on Gideon Pemberton for 18 months, for reasons unrelated to Jasmine. And when Delia reached out, she already had the scaffolding. What we gave her was the keystone. The story ran on a Thursday morning. It was 11,000 words long. It named names: Gideon Pemberton, Detective Vargas, the deputy mayor. The man without a title who I'd later learn was named Roland Fitch. It included the group chat. It included Delia's research on the 3 prior incidents. It included the settlement with the family from the neighboring town, whose NDA, Petra pointed out with the quiet satisfaction of someone who genuinely loves their work, was only binding on the family, not on anyone else who obtained the information independently. By noon on Thursday, the story had been shared 40,000 times. By midnight, it was national. The second front was legal. Petra filed a civil suit against Arlo Pemberton, Gideon Pemberton, and the Pemberton Family Trust on Thursday morning, timed to coincide with the story dropping. The complaint was 63 pages long and included counts of assault, battery, false imprisonment. intentional infliction of emotional distress, civil conspiracy, and negligent supervision. It cited Gideon's documented interference with the police investigation as consciousness of guilt. Harry Lee had faced good attorneys before. He had not, in some time, faced one who didn't need anything from the community where he was trying to operate. He called Petra on Friday. She let it go to voicemail. The third front was federal. This one was Coop's contribution. Coop had maintained, over the years of his civilian life, a careful and deliberate relationship with a former commanding officer who had moved into federal law enforcement. He made one call. He asked for nothing specific, just pointed a capable person toward a publicly available story, and said, if anyone's looking at civil rights violations and obstruction in that jurisdiction, this might be relevant. The FBI opened a preliminary inquiry into the conduct of the Hargrove Falls Police Department on the following Monday. Detective Vargas retired the same week. The retirement was announced as planned and long anticipated. Nobody believed that. The fourth front was personal. This one I handled differently. I won't give you the specifics, not because I'm not proud of it, but because some of what happened exists in a legal grey area that I have no interest in illuminating. What I will tell you is this. Arlo Pemberton's world had been built on the assumption of his protection, his father's money, his father's contacts, and the social architecture of a town where the Pemberton name opened doors and closed investigations and made inconvenient things quietly disappear. We removed that protection. When you remove the roof from a structure that was never built to stand on its own, the walls follow. Arlo found himself, for the first time in his life, genuinely alone. His teammates, the 10 boys from the group chat, had scattered the moment the story ran. 3 of them, to their credit, had come forward voluntarily before we contacted them. The other 7 were named in a separate complaint filed by Petra the following week. Scholarships evaporated. The football program was suspended pending an institutional review. College acceptances were deferred, then withdrawn, then became a moot point as the universities in question quietly indicated that enrollment would not be proceeding. Gideon Pemberton's construction contracts, the municipal ones, the county ones, the ones that had been quietly guaranteed by relationships built over 20 years, were reviewed. It turns out that when federal investigators start asking questions about whether those contracts were awarded through a process that was, in the technical legal sense, legitimate, the answers are often complicated. 3 contracts were suspended, 2 bids were voided. A grand jury subpoena was issued in December. Roland Fitch, the man without a title, had his title involuntarily clarified by Yolanda Marsh in a follow-up piece that ran 6 weeks after the first. He resigned from every board position he held and moved to a state 3,000 miles away within the month. The deputy mayor lost the following election by 31 points. This was the only part that felt, to me, honestly insufficient. 31 points should have been more. I want to be honest with you about this, because if I'm not, then this story is just a revenge fantasy, and Jasmine deserves better than that. What happened to her is not something that gets undone. That's the central permanent truth at the middle of everything else. The civil suit, the federal inquiry, the collapsing reputations, the men who've lost their contracts and their positions, and their easy access to power, none of that goes backward in time and gives Jasmine her senior year back. None of it undoes the 20 hours she spent in that pool house. None of it gives her back the 6 weeks she spent being genuinely, innocently happy about a dress and a corsage, and a boy she thought had chosen her. She had nightmares for a long time. She still has them sometimes, though less. She took a gap year. She spent a lot of it with a therapist named Dr. Anand, who had a practice in the city and a gift for helping people understand that surviving a thing and being defined by it are not the same. She spent the rest of it reading, mostly thick novels, history books, the occasional true crime that she'd pick up and then put down after the first chapter and not explain why. She started college the following fall. She's studying journalism. Of course she is. She called me on her first day, and I could hear something in her voice that had come back. That belly laugh warmth, that readiness, that quality she'd always had of moving toward the world rather than away from it. It wasn't exactly what it had been before. It was harder won, but it was there. I drove out to see her the second weekend of the semester. We had dinner at a bad Italian place near her dorm, and she told me about her professors and her roommate and the club she was thinking of joining, and I listened to every word and stored it somewhere I keep the important things. At the end of the night, walking back to my car, she stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me. "Dad." "Yeah. What you did?" She paused, searched for something. "I know it was partly for me, I know that, but I think it was also just..." She looked up, half smiling. "I think you were angry." "I was angry," I said. "Good," she said. She hugged me for a long time in the cold, right there on the sidewalk, and then she went inside, and I stood by my car until the light in her dorm window came on. Arlo Pemberton was charged criminally eventually. It took 14 months, a change of lead prosecutor, and what I'm told was substantial pressure from the federal inquiry on the county DA's office to prioritize the case without the quiet interventions it had previously received. Harry Lee was still on the case. He was very good. The trial was 8 days, and there were moments in that courtroom that were extraordinarily hard to sit through. Moments where Jasmine's words were picked at, reframed, questioned, put on trial alongside the boy who had hurt her. Petra had prepared her. It still cost something. On the 8th day, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty on the primary charge. Guilty on 2 of the 3 secondary charges. Gideon Pemberton, who had been sitting 6 rows behind his son every day of the trial, didn't make a sound when the verdict was read. He sat perfectly still, and I watched his face, and what I saw there wasn't grief or contrition or shame. What I saw was the specific hollow blankness of a man who has discovered, too late, that the machinery he spent his life building doesn't work anymore, that the phone calls don't go through, that the names he would have reached for aren't available. He had spent his son's childhood buying him a world with no consequences. He had brought him all the way to a criminal conviction. I don't know how to feel about Gideon Pemberton. I've tried. I've turned it over and looked at it from different angles, and I can't find an angle from which he becomes comprehensible to me. He loved his son, presumably, in whatever way he was capable of. And what he gave his son, in the name of that love, was a cage with comfortable walls, a place where Arlo never learned that other people were real, that their pain was real, that the world beyond his family's protection existed and had its own relentless gravity. You can buy a lot of things in this world. You cannot buy your children a character they didn't build themselves. Thank you for staying with me. Hit subscribe if you want more stories that go all the way. The dark, the complicated, and the moments when ordinary people decide that enough is enough. New stories every day. We don't look away here. Arlo was sentenced the following spring. He stood when the judge read the sentence, and he wasn't the swaggering boy who had shown up at Rachel's door with daisies. He was 20 years old, and he looked smaller than 20. I watched him, and I felt something that surprised me. I felt no pity, no forgiveness, nothing that simple. I felt, for just a moment, the ghost of what he might have been if someone had taught him differently. That ghost appeared, and then it disappeared, because the road from who he might have been to who he chose to become was paved with choices that he made, and the fact that he was never confronted with consequences before doesn't mean the choices weren't his. He made them. He made them about my daughter. The gavel came down. Jasmine is doing well. That is the most important sentence in this story, and I want you to sit with it for a moment before we move on. She is doing well. She is 20 years old and studying journalism, and has a roommate she describes as chaotic but lovable, and a professor who told her in October that she had a gift for finding the truth in a story and not letting it go. She got that from her mother. She got the not letting go part from me. Rachel is doing well too. She and I aren't what we were, or what we couldn't be, but something. Something honest and steady and rebuilt from the rubble of the worst year of our lives. We have dinner sometimes, the three of us. We are learning, slowly, to be a family of a different shape than the one we imagined. This is not the ending I would have chosen. I would have chosen the version where none of this happened, where Jasmine went to prom with a boy who genuinely wanted to be there with her, where she came home at 1 a.m. stepping on her train and laughing about it, where Rachel and I got to roll our eyes at each other over her head while she recapped the whole night in the car. I would have chosen that version without hesitation. But we don't choose the story we're given. We only choose what we do with it. What I chose was to not let them bury it. To not let Gideon Pemberton's phone calls and Roland Fitch's quiet maneuvering and Detective Vargas's careful blankness add my daughter's name to the list of things that were managed and silenced and made to disappear. There are 3 other families out there, the ones from before Jasmine, the ones whose settlements came with silence attached. I think about them. I hope they've found their way to something like, okay. I hope what happened with Jasmine's case gave them something, even if I can't know what. To those families, you were not forgotten. You were never as alone as they made you feel. This story is dedicated to every girl who was chosen as a punchline and became instead the whole point. You made it to the end of this story, and I'm grateful for that. Truly. Stories like this one don't exist in a vacuum. They exist because real things happen to real people. Girls who trust, families who fight, systems that fail, and communities that have to decide what to do about that failure. I want to ask you something, and I want you to take a moment with it before you scroll on. Have you ever watched someone get away with something and stayed silent because you didn't think your voice would matter? Or have you ever been the person who said something, did something, made one call, or sent one message, or told one other person, and watched that small act become part of something bigger than you expected? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear it. Not because I'm collecting stories, but because I genuinely believe that the most important thing the Jasmine Morrows of this world have going for them is the people who refuse to look away. Destiny Okafor took a screenshot 3 weeks before the prom because something felt wrong. She didn't know if it would matter. She did it anyway. That screenshot was in the first story Yolanda Marsh ever published about the Pembertons. That screenshot was in Petra's 63-page complaint. One screenshot. One girl who felt something and acted on it. What's the smallest act of not looking away that you've ever taken, or wish you had? Drop it below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because silence is a choice, and so is everything else.